Okay, today we are going to go over Lesson 2, Analyze Stylistic Elements in the Apple of Contentment. So we're going to begin by reading a story and then just answer some questions based on the story. So it says, read the following excerpt from the fable, The Apple of Contentment by Howard Pyle. Look at the stylistic elements described in Lesson 1, then choose the best answer. And if you remember from Lesson 1, a fable was usually a story with, a lot of times they'll include animals and stuff, and it usually has a moral or a lesson attached to it at the end of the story. So The Apple of Contentment, Part 1, from Pepper and Salt by Howard Pyle. So there once was a woman, and she had 3 daughters. The first daughter squinted with both eyes, yet the woman loved her as she loved salt. For she herself squinted with both eyes. The second daughter had one shoulder higher than the other, and eyebrows as black as soot in the chimney. Yet the woman loved her as well as she loved the other, for she herself had black eyebrows and one shoulder higher than the other. The youngest daughter was as pretty as a ripe apple, and had hair as fine as silk, the color of pure gold. But the woman loved her not at all, for, as I have said, she herself was neither pretty, nor had she hair of the color of pure gold. So let's pause for a minute. In the very first introduction of this fable, we have a woman who has 3 daughters. So right away, we have the stylistic element of the rule of 3, because we have 3 daughters here. We also know the woman loves the first and the second daughter because those 2 daughters have similar physical characteristics as the mother. And those physical characteristics aren't really like great ones. Like the first one squints her eyes. The second one has eyebrows black as soot in the chimney and also had like a wonky shoulder. And then the third one is actually described as being really pretty and having pure gold hair, but the mother doesn't like her because the mother isn't that pretty and doesn't have pure gold hair. So that's our exposition. That's where we start this story. Then it says the first sister and the second sister dressed in their Sunday clothes every day and sat in the sun doing nothing, just as though they had been royal ladies, both of them. As for Christine, that was the name of the youngest girl. As for Christine, she dressed in nothing but rags and had to drive the geese to the hills in the morning and home again in the evening, so that they might feed on the young grass all day and grow fat. The first sister and the second sister had white bread and butter beside, and as much fresh milk as they could drink. But Christine had to eat cheese parings and bread crusts, and had hardly enough of them. One morning, Christine started off to the hills with her flock of geese, and in her hand she carried her knitting, at which she worked to save time. So she went along the dusty road until, by and by, she came to a place where a bridge crossed the brook. And what should she see there but a little red cap with a silver bell at the point of it, hanging from the alder branch. It was such a nice, pretty little red cap that Christine thought that she would take it home with her, for she had never seen the likes of it in all her life. Here's a picture of the red cap she found. So she put it in her pocket, and then off she went with her geese again. But she had hardly gone 2 paces when she heard a voice calling her, "Christine, Christine!" She looked, and who should she see but a strange little gray man, with a great head as big as cabbage and little legs as thin as young radishes. "What do you want?" Christine asked when the little man had come closer. The little man only wanted his cap, for without it he could not go back home into the hill. That was where he belonged. But how did the cap come to be hanging from the bush? Yes, Christine would like to know that before she gave it back again. Well, the little hill man was fishing by the brook over yonder when a puff of wind blew his cap into the water, and he had just hung it up dry. That was all that there was about it. And now would Christine please give it to him? Christine did not know how about that. Perhaps she would, and perhaps she would not. It was a nice, pretty little cap. What would the little underground man give her for it? That was the question. "See, Christine," said the little man, "I will give you this for the cap." And he showed her something in his hand that looked just like a bean, only it was as black and as limp as coal. Yes, good, but what is that? Said Christine. That, said the little man, is a seed from the apple of contentment. Plant it, and from it will grow a tree, and from the tree an apple. Everybody in the world that sees the apple will long for it, but nobody in the world can pluck it but you. It will always be meat and drink to you when you are hungry, and warm clothes to your back when you are cold. Moreover, as soon as you pluck it from the tree, another as good will grow in its place. Now, will you give me my hat? Oh, yes, Christine would give the little man his cap for such a seed as that, and gladly enough. So the little man gave Christine the seed, and Christine gave the little man his cap again. He put the cap on his head, and puff, away he went, as suddenly as the light of a candle when you blow it out. Christine took the seed home with her and planted it in the front of the window of her room. The next morning, when she looked out the window, she beheld a beautiful tree, and on the tree hung an apple that shone in the sun as though it were pure gold. Then she went to the tree and plucked the apple as easily as though it were a gooseberry, and as soon as she plucked it, another good grew in its place. Being hungry, she ate it, and thought that she had never eaten anything as good, for it tasted like pancake with honey and milk. By and by, the oldest sister came out of the house and looked around. But when she saw the beautiful tree with the golden apple hanging from it, you can guess how she stared. Presently, she began to long and long for the apple, as she had never longed for anything in her life. I will just pluck it, she said, and no one will be the wiser for it. But that was easier said than done. She reached and reached, but she might as well have reached for the moon. She climbed and climbed, but she might as well have climbed for the sun, for either one would have been as easy to get as that which she wanted. At last she had to give up trying for it, and her temper was none the sweeter for it, you may be sure. After a while came the second sister, and when she saw the golden apple, she wanted it just as much as the first sister. But to want and to get are very different things, as she soon found, for she was no more able to get it than the other had been. Last of all came the mother, and she also strove to pluck the apple, but it was no use. She had no more luck of her trying than her daughters. All that the three could do was stand under the tree and look at the apple, and wish for it and wish for it. As for Christine, she had nothing to do but to pluck an apple whenever she wanted. Was she hungry? There was the apple hanging in the tree for her. Was she thirsty? There was the apple. Cold? There was the apple. So you see, she was the happiest girl between all the 7 hills that stand at the ends of the earth, for nobody in the world can have more contentment than that was what the apple brought her. Okay, so let's go to the questions, and I will try to kind of help guide you with these questions. So it says, which genre best describes this story, tall tale or fable? So it says this story is a fable because it has a moral and a magic helper. This story is a tall tale because it includes a moral. This story is a tall tale because it is written for humor. Or this story is a fable because there is a talking animal. So for me, just looking at this, there are some I think I can easily, some answers I can easily get rid of. I know that there were no talking animals in this story, so I'm going to eliminate that answer. I also just didn't think the story was funny. It was a good story, but it didn't make me laugh. So I'm going to say that it was not written for humor. So when you're choosing your answer, figure out if you think it's a fable because there's a moral and a magic helper. Remember the style elements from lesson 1. Magic helper was one of them. And then this story is a tall tale because it includes a moral. So you really have to decide, because both say moral here, which is a lesson learned, but you have to decide if it had a magic helper, somebody who popped in, helped them, and popped back out. All right, then go down to number 2. It says, which words help to define the word pluck, included several times in the story. So you may have noticed in the story the word pluck was always in bold because they would pluck the apple from the tree. So let's see, which words help define the word pluck? The words in its place and wiser for it help to define the word. The words gooseberry and apple help to define the word. The words tree and grow help to define the word. Or the words reached and to get it help to define the word. So when you are plucking an apple from a tree, consider which of these words would better show the action of plucking something. And then let's move on to the next question. So it says, what is the meaning of the word pluck according to its context? So to pluck something from the tree, does it mean meant to be, to plant, to pick, or fruit? So take a moment and answer questions, then move on to number 4. It says the apple of contentment follows the rule of 3 by including 3 what? And we talked about this at the beginning. So in the very first paragraph here, it lists 3 people. Who are they? So answer that one: trees, geese, apples, or daughters. And then go on to number 5. All right, it says, what purpose does the stylistic element achieve? So we know that it had multiple stylistic elements. We do know that there were 3 daughters. We also know that there was a little man, a little gray man who kind of popped into the story, helped her with something, and popped back out. So those are both stylistic elements. So the story is broken up into 3 parts. The story is more effective and memorable. The story infers a supernatural world exists, or the story leaves the reader in a positive mood. So for this one, I would look back at lesson 1. You had that chart with the stylistic elements, and in the very first section it said the rule of 3, and it told you in the middle what that element helps achieve. So I'll eliminate some questions for you, or some answers for you, and you can go back to that chart and look it up. The answer is right there. All right, number 6, who is the magic helper? The wise tree, the strange little gray man, a talking horse, or an animated apple? So take a moment. Some of these are easy to eliminate because they definitely weren't anywhere in the story. So you can go ahead, you can use your little answer eliminator and eliminate those. Then answer it, go down to number 7. So it says, what purpose does this stylistic element achieve? So the stylistic element that they're talking about is the magic helper. So the little gray man who pops in, gives her the seeds, and pops back out. So the magic helper makes the story more satisfying, effective, and memorable for the reader. The magic helper gives supernatural help to the victim, which is exciting for the reader. The magic helper overcomes a challenge alongside the hero, is exciting for the reader. Or the magic helper deceives the victim, which gives the reader a villain to dislike. So I'm going to eliminate just one answer for you, and then I feel like you can probably eliminate 2 more yourself, and so go ahead and do that and then pick the correct answer. And then go to number 8. So it says, what is the moral that the story teaches? So remember, whenever you're looking at the moral or the lesson of a story, it's best, I think, to look at not only the title of the story, the apple of contentment, but also the very last paragraph, because that's usually where they sum it all up and you kind of get an idea of what the lesson is. So think about the apple of contentment. To be content is to be happy with what you have and where you are. So we know that the other sisters couldn't pluck the apple. And then it says, but for Christine, she had nothing to do but pluck the apple whenever she wanted. If she was hungry, there was an apple. If she was thirsty, there was the apple. If she was cold, there was the apple. So you see, she was the happiest girl between all the 7 hills that stand at the ends of the earth. For nobody in the world could have more contentment, and that was what the apple brought her. So as you're answering this one, this last sentence is a huge hint to what the theme or the moral of the story is. So let's go down. So what is the moral the story teaches? A, people should try to pick fruit that belongs to another. B, only contentment brings true happiness. C, some people just have special abilities, or jealousy is destructive. I'll eliminate one for you. All right, and then go down to number 9. It says, what theme does the entire story deliver about life? So it says, people who are unfair will be punished. Justice will eventually triumph for those who are mistreated. Magic does exist to help the unfortunate, or people should never withhold what belongs to another person. All right, so for this one, you have to remember that Christine, the youngest daughter, was not treated well by her mother or her sisters. And she had to work all day while the sisters just laid in the sun and did whatever they wanted. So keep that in mind as you answer, and I will eliminate a couple of answers here. So it's going to be between these two. All right, so again, when you're finished, make sure you go here to save and exit, and I will see you at our next lesson.